ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿಯವರೇ, ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಚನ್ನಬಸಪ್ಪನವರೇ, ಮೌಖಿಕ ಅತಿಥಿಗಳೇ, ಸಹೋದರ ಸಹೋದರಿಯರೇ, ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನನ್ನ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಮತ್ತು ಗುಡ್ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್. You know, days in Boston don't get any better than this. Do you all agree that it's a good morning? Good morning. Come on, it can be a lot louder than that. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, ಬಸವಣ್ಣನವ್ರ ಅವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋದಂದ್ರೆ ವಚನದಿಂದನ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಭಾಷಣ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಧ್ವನಿ ಕುಡಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ I'm going to request Gangadhar Patil, my brother-in-law, to join me here just to chant one vachana.
Kalabeda, kolabeda, husiyanudiyalubeda. Kalabeda, kolabeda, husiyanudiyalubeda. ತನ್ನ ಬಣ್ಣಿಸಬೇಡ, ಇದಿರ ಹಳಿಯಲು ಬೇಡ. ಕಳಬೇಡ, ಕೊಲಬೇಡ, ಹುಸಿಯ ನುಡಿಯಲು ಬೇಡ. ಇದೇ ಅಂತರಂಗ ಶುದ್ಧಿ, ಇದೇ ಬಹಿರಂಗ ಶುದ್ಧಿ, ಇದೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೂಡಲ ಸಂಗದೊಲಿಸುವ ಪರಿ. ಕಳಬೇಡ, ಕೊಲಬೇಡ, ಹುಸಿಯ ನುಡಿಯಲು ಬೇಡ. ಹುಸಿಯ ನುಡಿಯಲು ಬೇಡ. ಹುಸಿಯ ನುಡಿಯಲು ಬೇಡ.
ಅವ್ರ ಅಗ್ದಿ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಲಕ್ಷದೊಳಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ಚಂದ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಮೋರ್ ರೀಸೆಂಟ್ಲಿ DVG ಅವರು ಮಂಕುತಿಮ್ಮನ ಕಗ್ಗದೊಳಗೆ ಹೊಸ ಚಿಗರು ಹಳೆಬೇರು ಕೂಡಿರಲು ಮರಸೊಬಗು, ಹೊಸ ಯುಕ್ತಿ ಹಳೆ ತತ್ವ ದಡಗೂಡಿ ಧರ್ಮ ಅಂತ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಟುಡೇ ಸ್ವಾಮೀಜಿ CD is a great example of that ಹೊಸ ಚಿಗರು ಹಳೆಬೇರು ಹಳೆ ತತ್ವ. You know, today, this morning, I've been asked to talk a little bit about Daasoha. And the point I'm going to make is that, you know, I think a lot of us, who came more from the professional background, probably think about Daasoha and what you do every day in your work as two separate things. And the point I'm going to make today is that they're really not two separate things, and they're more or less the same. I came from, just like most of you, from the professional background, entrepreneur, somebody who ran a business, who started companies and so on. It's only in the last 10 years that I've been dabbling with this social entrepreneurship, social consciousness and so on. And so what I want to do today is to really talk about the two different perspectives and try to convince you that both sides have a lot to learn from each other. And when you actually start combining the two, there really isn't much difference between the two things. You know, when you look at the for-profit organizations and the sort of non-profit organizations, if you really want to separate them out into those two things, since Basavana spoke about compassion 1,000 years ago, the world has changed quite a bit. But the basic fundamentals of compassion have not changed. There's a lot that's changed in the for-profit world. You know, now you can build organizations, there's technology, there are things that you can do to scale and do all those things. And in sometimes the for-profit world forgets all about compassion. And when that happens, the world becomes ruthless, and you know what happens. And we've seen a lot of it happen in US in the last 10 years. But it's not like the world that's compassionate doesn't have much to learn. They also have a lot to learn. And let me try to sort of separate the two sides. So the good thing about the for-profit world is that it's very Darwinian in nature. Meaning, if the non-profit world does not do what the customer wants, that organization does not exist anymore. So it's very Darwinian in its nature. So most of the organizations that work in the for-profit world are performing assets, whether they have the right compassion and the right goal. But whatever mission that they want to accomplish, they don't accomplish, they get out of business. If you have a restaurant and you don't serve good food for 2 weeks, that restaurant will not be in business, it's gone. In the non-profit world, the big thing is compassion. You know, people really have compassion. The only reason they do the non-profit is because they really want to help the world. But the beneficiary in the non-profit world does not have the buying power. So the non-profit world does not have the automatic feedback loop that you have in the for-profit world. And as a result, the non-profit world, there are a lot of very good non-profits, but there's a whole bunch of non-profits that don't really function anymore. They used to function once upon a time. And over the course of time, it's possible that they don't have to be as good, but they don't get out of business. They still survive. So over the course of time, the ratio of non-performing assets can be more than the performing assets in the non-profit world. You know, in US, the non-profit sector is about $300 billion a year. And there's over 1 million non-profit organizations. In India, also, there's a lot of very compassionate people, and there's over 1 million non-profit organizations in India. But most of the non-profit organizations, you know, they get underfunded. You know, usually it's one poor person who says, I'm going to start a school, starts a school, and then he has a 1 lakh rupee. Obviously, he can't build a school for that resource. And then some other donor comes along and says, you know, schools are important, but health is really important, and he gives him another lakh. So now he's doing both school and a hospital. And so slowly over the course of time, they try to do everything and nothing much happens. And so the new thing that you really want to bring from the non-profit, from the for-profit world, is the execution excellence of the for-profit world into the non-profit world. And somehow build an organization where you get a good feedback loop, where the beneficiary actually participates in the value creation and the sustainability of the whole organization. So we started, I and Jayashree, we started our work about 10 years ago, and the first big thing we did here was at MIT. I've been on the board of MIT now for about 10, 11 years. And so we started a center here, and this is more at the high end of the nonprofit sector, which is more really to say all the good thinkers that you have in places like MIT, how can they contribute more to the society? And so the big sort of insight there has been that for these innovators to actually have an impact on the world, the innovators have to be connected to relevance, to what's important in the world. That is, it's not just a good idea that you need, but you need a good idea that's relevant to the world. Because if you leave all the good thinkers in a society by themselves, even though they may have a huge desire to have an impact on the society, they very quickly get into the business of impressing each other as opposed to actually having that impact on the world. In fact, if you read the biography of Basavana, you'll see the same thing. I mean, what he did was slowly the society was getting to the point where the experts and the scholars and the thinkers and the innovators were all mostly in the business of impressing each other and had a clubby society. And he came and he connected all this deep thinking to the common man. So connecting relevance to innovation has been sort of the work that we did at MIT, and now I co-chair a council for Obama to see if we can actually extend that practice to all the $150 billion we spend in the United States. About 6 years ago, we said, what can we do about this in India? So when we took it to India, we said, let's not do technological innovation, but do social innovation. And so we just reversed that equation and said, let's see if we can bring innovation to relevance. So we started this program in Hubli, Dharwar. Several of you are probably from that area. In about an area of about 5 million people, we fund about 60 nonprofits and really try to say, just like you do a startup, see if you can identify an intervention, finally define what is it that you're doing differently that really could solve the problem. And if you can solve the problem, optimize it, and then you scale it just like you'd scale any organization. And also to think about sustainability up front. That is, a lot of the nonprofits, they get started and then they depend so much on the donation of 1 or 2 people, they scale, and then they get stuck because they can't sustain themselves. So whenever we start any of these organizations, we're thinking about sustainability, and the sustainability comes from one of the 3 different ways. One is a free market economy. Some of the interventions you come up with is where the beneficiary can actually pay for it. Some of it happens because the government already has a program and the government can actually fund that program. Or it's a very broad-based charity where thousands and millions of people are just giving $1 or 10 rupees each, something like that, which also can be sustained, or a combination of the 3. So within these programs, some of the programs, out of the 60 programs, there's a few of them which have already scaled quite a bit. First of them is Akshay Patra. Akshay Patra is a program to provide midday meal for school children. How many of you have heard about Akshay Patra? Hey, good. So for those of you who haven't heard, it's an organization that provides midday meal, and the biggest kitchen is in Hubli. And this one kitchen makes 185,000 meals a day for 12 cents a meal. And so for $30, you can feed a kid for the whole year. So they mastered supply chain, accounting, process, ISO 9001 certification, good engineering. So in the last 5-6 years, they've taken this model and scaled it up to 1.3 million meals a day. So that's so all of you who sort of work in the for-profit sector, if you can bring your skills and capabilities to some of these interventions, you can help these people scale. The one right behind that is a program called Agastya, which is to teach science to rural kids. So last year, he actually touched 700,000 kids, school-going children in villages where they actually take science to these kids. The program has been so successful that the government of Karnataka just adopted, and they're going to be funding the entire program, and he's scaling it to 7 million kids in 3 years. Another program is Vidya Poshak. Vidya Poshak is a program which provides scholarship to kids who can't afford to go to college. And in fact, Appa Madiwale, where are you? Appa? Okay, Appa Madiwale is here, and he is sort of dedicating his rest of the, a big portion of his time to helping this organization. So you can definitely learn more about Vidya Poshak from Appa Madiwale. So similarly, I know Samarthanam is here. I think they help the people who are disadvantaged and the blind kids and so on. I understand they're going to be performing. So, I think in India, it's not just what we're doing in Hubli Dharwad. It's what Swamiji does. It's what a lot of people do. In India, somehow, a lot of people think that India is good for software and all these companies. But I see a lot more happening in India than that. When I left India in 1973, India had the number. Everything has to be big because billions of people live there. Affordability is very low. So the innovation in India is all about coming up with solutions that are very affordable and scaling them. But what did not exist in India in 73, number one was the confidence. Number two, access to management, technology, all the Hosachigaru, all that stuff that could be available. But what's amazing now is that there is a lot of people doing extraordinary work in India. And a lot of it is possible because in India, on one side, you have huge problems which are intractable. But on the other hand, you have 1 or 2% of the population that's extremely knowledgeable and global in its perspective. They can compete with anybody in whether it's technology or management or finance or any of these things. So the big promise in India is to really bring the two together, is to bring the practice, the execution excellence, and the modern approaches and the best techniques that you have to actually solve these problems in a big way. And if you can actually do that, what that does is it actually brings hope to the largest population, right? And this can happen only in India. It cannot happen in China, because China does not have the freedom to sort of be able to do these things. It cannot happen in Africa, because you don't have the 1 or 2% of that population that's globally competent. But if India can do that, and the good thing about India is that every time I go back there, and I go back every 2-3 months, the biggest thing I see in India is a hope. You know, it doesn't matter how poor people are. Even if they don't see a lot for themselves, they see a lot happening with their kids. They're always hopeful that their kids will do a lot better than what they do. And that hope is the biggest asset that this world will have. And it has a lot of underpinning in the religion. It has a lot of underpinning in the philosophy. But it also has the underpinnings in this new compassion that the country is finding. And that hope is what India can export in another 5 years if you look forward, because that's what the world needs. You know, I go to Palestine, and whether you go to Pakistan or Middle East or a lot of these countries, their per capita income is a lot higher than what India has. But what they lack is hope. And when you don't have hope, and when people are willing to kill themselves, there's not much you can negotiate with them. You know, the world becomes a very dangerous place. Whereas in India, people have hope. And when they have that hope, it becomes a better society. And so, if India can actually be known to the rest of the world as the exporter of hope, then I think we can all be really proud of what India can do. So, I think my final word to you is that, you know, unless you can bring the same compassion that Basavanna had for the society into everything you do, not just writing a check for a charity or working with the poorest of the poor, but to everyday work that you do, because each one of us get up in the morning and go to work and do something because we all have a desire to make this a better world. We want to create a better product, a better service, a better school, a better educational institution, or something. And if we can bring the same compassion to everything that we do, and if we can bring the execution excellence to everything that we do in the social sector, then I think this will be a beautiful world, and I'm sure all of you will be an active reason as to why this world will become a better place. Thank you, and thank you.